when esoteric religion is somehow behind in the background, that has had an impact on so many changes. I'll share a personal view right now, which is I can see the October Rebellion focusing very much on a people's coup, if you like, a people's takeover of democracy. If it continues in the UK to be so utterly shambolic and showing itself in literally a state of collapse. And I would argue underneath that is what we might call the sacred. It might not be the language that works for everybody. It needs to be a language that works for you, whether you're atheist or whatever. So it may feel that it has a spiritual perspective, but I'm essentially talking about love and the consciousness that we're running in our brains. Ultimately, and there seems to be lots of evidence from the science actually, there is a oneness, a connection of energy between us, and that there could be an actual purpose to life itself, that you could see your life, if you had connection to your ancestors, and then thinking about the next 7 generations, that your life has an inherent purpose within that flow of life. And to, you know, a capitalist consumerist society is very much wanting to disconnect us from that. Lots of brain sciences suggesting that when we're more in our right brains than our left brains, so look up Ian McGilchrist's work, for example, The Master in His Emissary, that we have a deeper connection to the oneness. And I want to just speak very briefly to something controversial. I've been speaking about psychedelic medicines. They're not for everybody. They've been part of my path, and they very much speak to me in terms of access to these processes. They need to be used in really safe and healthy ways if anybody is using them. There's lots of information out there on reset.me. They are not, XR doesn't have a position on them, but there's lots of science regarding their use and how people become more nature connected as a result. And there is also a deep indigenous tradition on them, that it is part of people's spiritual practice, and that it's an assault on freedom not to be able to do those practices. So that's why I've spoken to it, and it's because I think it's so central to this theory of change for many of us. This is not something you have to sort of believe in and be a hippie around, that there is that possibility, at least. I'm suggesting to be open to it, that love is underneath what really matters to us. So then when we think about how things change, you can look at it in a 2x2 matrix. And I've based this on the work of Mika White. He was a person that was part of the Occupy movement. And again, I'm not talking about wafty woo-woo stuff. I'm just talking about there are aspects that we're not necessarily fully cognizant of, but there is science out there talking in that way. I personally believe that science and spirituality are on their way to unification, but that's a personal view. It's worth mentioning that Wei Sang, in reviewing a lot of revolutionary movements, noted that the things that really help in them are obviously being well organised, and our systems are really helping us with that, and obviously always need improving. It's also about aspects of charisma that come through in our movements, and I think that's really important, how we all show up in our leadership and bring our true selves forwards, and that our hearts and our vulnerability and our love, and I think authenticity, and I think that's what charisma's about for me. And then the other bit is when esoteric religion is somehow behind in the background, that has had an impact on so many changes.
Why?
The section that's about asserting our collective will, the actual technical term for it is called voluntarism. That's when we tackle the pillars of this system. So the pillars, the fake democracy, the destructive economy, the toxic media. There's also then what's called subjectivism, which is the idea that you won't really make these changes at the systems level if we don't change ourselves, if we don't change how the system's showing up in us. And that's really about that patriarchal scarcity, separation and powerlessness. And then there's another piece that gets more esoteric that's called theurgism. It's the idea that there could be divine intervention. Sounds a bit mental, I know, and I also feel as a scientist a bit odd saying that, but I do have personally a spiritual practice of prayer, and I think you can also talk about it just from the perspective of, you know, how it feels for you, your own consciousness, the better part of yourself, what it means to be in touch with sacredness, what meaning is there in your life, what purpose, how you are feeling a vision being lifted up by this movement. How do we change ourselves? You know, this system is in us. And so really we're talking about ways of tackling the patriarchal wounds. I just want to say how important it is that we're looking at ourselves, you know, in what we're bringing forward.
I used to talk to a lot of people who were deeply involved with Eastern spirituality, with Buddhism, occasionally Hinduism, and so on, Buddhism of different schools, and they'd make similar lofty and vague claims about how deeply committed they were to practicing the Dharma, as if their head were on fire, changing the world, saving the planet. But you know, when it came to really simple, practical implementation of those ethical values in their daily lives, when it came to the challenge of eating a vegan diet, for example, they'd just give up, they'd just quit, they wouldn't even try. And these imbeciles, the leaders of Extinction Rebellion, are extremely hypocritical examples of this, because they're not merely un-vegan, they're not merely non-vegan, they're openly anti-vegan while leading this supposedly revolutionary ecological movement. Quote, I'm starting in the middle here, I strongly oppose the religious bit and that we all have energy and the esoteric bullshit. I think it's weird that Dr. Broadbrook isn't vegan. She talks about love. She talks about the destruction of our environment, which will put huge stress on society once the weather gets worse and food gets scarce, blah, blah, blah. She also talks about subjectivism, which means changing ourselves, but only in a vague sense, not actually refusing to eat mince pie, not actually refusing to eat sausages or refusing to kill a sheep to eat its blood and such. No, not giving up dairy, milk, and cheese. No, just, inner transformation. Right. And I guess as a leader, you in this case have to be the best role model possible to come across as a credible and strong person who believes in what she or he is preaching. In a Q&A from June 2019, Dr. Broadbrook states that, these days, I feel that my relationship with eating animals is meant to be limited and based in deep gratitude. So playing devil's advocate here, she doesn't change her own behavior given the environmental impact of animal food products. I'm paraphrasing slightly. Given that killing conscious beings isn't consistent with, quote unquote, having a lot of love for others, raises a lot of questions about what this bullshit philosophy means in practice, or whether or not she can live up to any of her own principles, either on the ecological side or on the more vague, compassionate side. Stop telling me, quote unquote, veganism won't solve anything and that the capitalist system must be overthrown. Am I supposed to believe that the people who refuse to change what they eat for breakfast are interested in changing the world? Question mark. Shut the fuck up. You ain't overthrowing shit. Well said, DS, anonymous commentator, whoever you are. Shout out to DS.
And that's a vision that is universally known about, like for the Jewish faith, it's Tikkun Olam. In Africa, it's talked about as Ubuntu, and there's been lots of ways the vision sensing team led by Skinner Rathor can bring that through in multiple of languages and cultural relevant ways, as in by asking people from different cultures to write that how they feel it. There is something more mystical that happens behind the scenes, which is that people hold prayers, and you know, again, scientifically you can think about it as potentially that there is an inherent purpose in the universe, and it doesn't matter if there isn't. If there is, it's worth having a go, isn't it? Right, that's how I see it. So it's about asking for help, you know, and it maybe just helps with a different bit of your brain. There's some great science of neuroplasticity, for example. So if you do a ritual or some ceremony or something like that, it follows the stages of it follows the same stages that neuroplasticity science says you should do if you want to change your brain. So this idea that you would say, like, you know, I'm intending for this action to go really well, set a group intention together and really ask for help for that. There's something here about meaning of our own lives, about our own hero's journey. It's called the monomyth, that context that we have in our lives between our ancestors and those that come after us. Unhooking yourself from the system, either by arrest or by really supporting that process for other people that says we disobey this system because it's fucking us over, right? And then the move towards teal consciousness and connection to oneness, to, you know, and it is in the physics, basically, this idea that you know, whether if you're looking at M theory, I'm not up on all the latest physics, but
I'm not a hero. I'm not a guru.
Why? 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 Why?
Please don't worship me. No one is a saviour of this movement.
Why?
It's not like some woo-woo hippie thing again. So without going into it in great detail, you know, there's that. We can be running many layers of this consciousness throughout a given day. So the teal layer and the turquoise layer right now. And as I say, you can ask people questions apparently on a questionnaire to figure out what bits people are holding. And I hope none of this sounds pretty arrogant or superior, that I'm talking about consciousness levels, but needing to come together to rewire humanity. You know, so again, it needs to be from that teal consciousness that's not in opposition. We're not having a fight. We're having a grown-up conversation to say, this isn't working for us. What do we need to do differently?
Da, 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 da.